Vivid Ideas is all about the thought, the creativity, the passion, the planning that goes into creating unforgettable creative experiences, products, events, services, you name it. And over the past 12 days here at Vivid Ideas this year, we've brought some incredible people to Sydney to share their experiences in workshops, in these keynote sessions, and in industry events all day long as well. So I think you're in for a particular treat tonight. Gadi Amit has been recognised as one of the US National Design honorees, and he's also been, his company New Deal Design has won over 100 design awards for creating incredible products, from the Netgear router that most of you have probably had in your homes to the Fitbit tracker that you might be wearing right now, products like the Litro camera, which is also really distinctive and unusual, a well thought out design, as well as a whole lot of services and products that we don't get to see because they're under NDAs and on the rest of it. What we've asked Gadi to come here today to talk to us about is about designing products that we love. And there's this whole new category of products in this quantified self, Internet of Things movement that are an entirely new product categories and categories that we live with in new ways. So having said all that, Gadi is incredibly critical of some of those phrases and trends and fads. So I think you're in for a very interesting and quite philosophical approach to the art of design. So all the way from San Francisco for his very first visit to Australia, please welcome Gadi Amit. Now, we'll be taking, come on up, Gadi. We'll be taking your questions a bit later on, so please tweet using the hashtag #VividIdeas, and we'll also have a microphone later. But for now, Gadi.
Hi, good evening. Not so critical, I'm just introspective. I had New Deal Design. It's a studio. It's very important for me that it's going to be a studio. I actually left in January 1st, 2000, a very large agency, Frog Design, to start a studio. And for me, it's been very, very important that the traditional design craft still is being practiced and is still very, very relevant for cutting-edge technology. As a matter of fact, I think that without these type of doodles and mishaps and models, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So this is a little bit of kind of a sizzle reel that we do. What do? We bring brains, bravery, and magic to make people smile. That's our motto. And it combines things that are very important for us to combine. There are things that are more cerebral and things that are more emotional, and there's always some kind of underline of a gutsy, contrarian approach that actually led us to do a lot of what we do today. So to start, let's have some fun.
Walter! Wally? Where could he be? You dog.
Welcome back, Walter. Your regular suite, I presume?
There's a dark part of town where the girls get down, and I cannot wait for a chance to go. Wait for a chance to go. I got my bad luck shoes and every excuse to dance these blues away. Ain't coming home. I ain't coming home. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Sit up, sit up, sit up.
Walter.
I can't go cold.
So how'd you pay for all this anyway? Okay.
Okay, so that's a product that this is the second version of Whistle. It was designed more or less in 2 weeks. And what you see here is the first version of Whistle. And the interesting thing about the first video that you saw, I'm going to throw all the buzzwords. People know what's geofencing and all that. So bottom line, it's a GPS tracker that allows you to know where the dog is. And the interesting story behind the story is that about a year and a half ago, two wonderful guys, Ben and Steven, come to my office. And they are very cerebral guys, very cool guys, but they love dogs. And they want to do something that is with dogs. And Ben, I think, was some kind of a stockbroker and just had enough of it or something like that. And they started Whistle. And the story of how to make a wearable, another buzzword, a device that is on your dog and allows you to know what the dog has done or has gone through is very important. So you see a little bit of the stats, and we've been talking about what constitutes a playtime, how many wiggles of the tail you need to have, and so on. And the device had a plate of aluminum to actually prevent it from being chewed. And there were a lot of discussions about the form. And actually, we opted for a very simple form rather than, let's say, a dog bone or something like that, because we wanted the dog to be cool and respectable and serious. So, and the other thing about Whistle, I don't know how they do it. They find the most beautiful dogs on the planet for the PR. And they're just lovable. And the whole story behind Whistle is very much what we do. About half the projects we do are for companies like Whistle, startups. And the other half is very much similar type of problems, but for very large companies. So at the end of my presentation, I'll show you some of the work that we've done for a very large company called Google. And we do similar dark projects for all the big guys. We won the National Design Award last year, and the team was pretty happy. And what we try to do in our work is balancing, or basically counterbalancing, something that the Silicon Valley doesn't have. Most of the people we deal with are people that are generally brainiacs. They are amazingly creative, amazingly smart people, and yet in their grooming as executives and as engineers, there is typically something that is missing, and this is the emotional qualities. So for us at New Deal, through the whole process, we always try to balance humanities with functionalities, and that's something that needs a lot of conversation. For us, the dialogue between people, and we typically operate within a team of, let's say, 15, 20 people, some of them with the client, some of them with us, some other experts. So that community is a community of people that have a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts, and we're trying to cultivate that dialogue. So emotional qualities, humanistic values are actually just as effective and just as relevant to the functional or utilitarian values. Many people in the Valley think this is the future, and this is not a joke. Every meeting I have with a potential client somehow veers into discussions of Star Trek. I don't know if they noticed, but at Star Trek, everybody wears uniform and has a hierarchy and so on. It's just not exactly reality. For me, it's very important to take these technologies and actually bring them back into human scale. And the process that allowed us to create Lytro, the camera, started with that. I had a discussion with Ren Ang, by the way, an Australian, I think. I think he's from Melbourne. Is that recognized as Australia? Okay. I noticed that between Sydney and Melbourne, there's very much the same rivalry as between San Francisco and LA. So, we had a wonderful discussion, and then at one point I said, the camera should be very much like a kaleidoscope. And that became kind of a gesture that drove a lot of the discussions. We had other alternatives, but the more we played with that, the more we saw it was essential. And essentially, the project was done in that brief moment of a dialogue between Ren and myself. And a year and a half later, Dave Evans, who's has been one of the lead designers there, he walks in the streets of Milan and he calls us and say, I just spotted somebody using Lytro from half a block away because of that gesture. And the gesture is so different than a camera. It's essentially a non-camera. It's an imager. The whole concept of what you do with images today is that you basically snap the image, and then later reprogram it, reprocess it, refocus it, reinterpret it. And that's the essence of Lytro. The camera has been a huge success in terms of promoting the technology, the light field technology that Ren invented. It's been a very tough uphill battle, and this is a part of the story about bravery. It was quite controversial to bring it to market because most executives and people around us wanted to have a camera, a normal camera. However, there were some serious constraints as far as electronics and optics that really led us to justify it, not only from a gestural perspective, but also from a practical perspective. Now, going back to the early statement I made about artistic values and craftsmanship values in technology, I have this strong belief that designers should have a very strong intuitive sense of form and scale of what they do. And today, with a lot of the CAD and computers, designers tend to lose it. So it's an interesting sketch. You see a napkin sketch. Ren asked us to figure out what is the center of gravity, CG, we call it in vernacular, that when you snap the picture, there'll be minimum vibrations. Now, the problem, it was done half a year before everything was calculated and put on computers and so on. So I did this sketch, and it took some data from the lens, but we kind of wiggled and threw some numbers around other components. And the interesting thing is that a year later, when the camera was done, the images more or less match perfectly, both in proportion and both in the location of the center of gravity. And we use intuition on a daily basis, and I actually believe that intuition is some kind of super thinking process. It's beyond, most people relegate intuition into nonsense, but it's actually the opposite. I think actually intuition is somewhat of amalgamation of all kinds of calculations that if you have a good sense of it, you kind of say it's more or less there. What we do, in essence, is what I call an architecture. We are architects of products. We actually created the basis for this arrangement. You see the optics in the front, and then the electronics is actually split into 4 boards and the battery is this cubical form in between. And then engineers are actually following more or less that and detail the hell out of it. This is a different perception of design. Typically, design was called to round the corners and do some lipstick on top of what engineers already set. In our process, we actually set the fundamental architecture, the physical architecture, and then engineers follow it. So one of the toughest things for engineers typically working with us is to understand that they'll follow us, not the opposite. And after few exchanges, it's been set, or else, you know, we cannot work. So this is the story of Lytro. The other story with Lytro was actually about experience, the user interface. All cameras are based today, all digital cameras are based on a user interface that requires you to first snap the shot, and then if you want to review what you've done, you would go back to a different mode, typically a library, and sift through it and then find out what you had. Now with Lytro, this sketch actually is a new invention. What you need to do is basically imagine the whole roll of images starting from right to left. The new image will arrive on the right, and all the images are going to be stored as one big line on the left. And the only thing you need to do is to flick with the finger back and forth. So there are no separations of archive and camera functions. So this is more or less what you see. The image comes from the right and goes to the left. So this is another aspect of our work. What has happened with industrial design, and I'm by training industrial designer, it kind of got fused with software design. And with things like Lytro, there are no ways around it. You basically need to think about the user experience and the physical experience at the same moment. So that's what we've done with Lytro. Now, I want to move forward. I'm going to focus the following part of the presentation on wearables and interface. And we are definitely within some kind of revolution or evolution. And there are a lot of wearables that are going to be invented. Some of them are already there. Some of them will be reintroduced and so on. The big problem is to understand what are those wearables, because I heard not so long ago that people who design headsets are supposedly doing wearables. So this is not, according to me, not wearable. Wearables, in the context of what I'm going to speak about, are things that are sensing you. They have sensors. They are gathering and reporting data. And they tend to want to be with you as many hours as possible. Part of the story of gathering data and analysis of that data is to gather a long track, basically a long timeline of the data, and then you could actually analyze that. And the issue with interface is actually just as complicated as that. So one of the things with wearables is they need to interface with the human body. Now, the human body is a very effective form, but it's also a very bizarre form. It's actually very different from, I don't think there's any one person here that will match the next one next to it. It's actually amazingly diverse. And we also need to understand the human inside that body. So that means that we need to deal with cultural, emotional, and a whole variety of issues that typically weren't discussed. Let's say if you were designing washing machines 15 years ago. And there are a lot of aspects of the digital side of this interface, whether the apps or the cloud elements of this that are actually very complicated and needs to be figured out before we design it. So today we're in a process where out of research labs, many sensors are being developed. There are sensors that are capable of detecting certain biological or chemical markers. There are sensors that deal with exposure, for instance, to sun. There are a lot of sensors that are built around sports science, not only movement, but also posture and the right movement and so on. We talked about pets earlier on. There are sensors that deal with water intake, growth, and the interesting side of sensors today that some of them are moving into mood, emotions, mental states, and so on. So there's a giant revolution in sensors, and the question is what to do with them. The other thing that we know through the first generation of wearables is that if you do the right design and the right digital thinking, you can really augment lives. We know, for instance, that people who use Fitbit or other wearables along these lines are changing their approach to health. People are losing weight. After a while, they stop using it. This is a problem, but we'll get to talk about it later maybe. But these devices create impact. They do have impact on life. And the problem, though, is that continuously we see ourselves more or less detached from each other. This is a very common couple romantic moment. And we all see that. It's all the time. We all go into this zone and deal with our digital life or digital persona rather than interacting with the person across the table. And we got these phenomena. There are technologies that are great, technologies that are amazingly sophisticated. However, they have problem with humanity. And the problem with humanity is that humanity refuses to play. And glass has been, in perception, so far, a controversial device. And there are reasons why. It's an achievement from a technology perspective. It maybe is a great way of introducing new technology, but the public perception has been negative so far. And there are people who are trying to bypass that. And the bottom line is that this world has gone through a lot of experimentation, but generally, the interaction with these devices is very complicated, way too complicated. In essence, what we're talking about, we have two groups of people. The people on the left, which are symbolizing quite a lot of the valley. And by the way, I was at Stanford last week, and I talked to some students, and apparently they know one of these guys. So honestly, oh yeah, this is Tim or whatever. So, and these guys want a lot of data. They think the more, the better. Give me more and more data, I'll figure out what to do with it. The guys on the right, by the way, that's my team, normal guys, they play bocce balls and drink beer and all that. They don't want a lot of data. They want to play bocce ball. And that is, in essence, two groups. There's 1% of guys who crave data, and there are 99% people who just want to go with their life, enjoy it, and have the technology in the background. So let's talk about what it takes to design wearables. They got issues of size. Now, we have about 30, 35 people in the office, and there's one size that is very popular now, which is the circumference of a wrist. Within this group of 30 people, we have 2x size gamut, or separation. So between the smallest person, smallest wrist, and the largest, there's basically 100% growth. And we found out later that our big guy is not the biggest, so we got even more. So this is something quite fundamental. If you see dad here, let's say 220 pounds in a good day, versus the baby, let's say 10, 15 pounds. So it's 10x. So this is a huge problem, huge, huge problem. And the baby grows. Fashion. So very fashionable ladies, but from an analytical designery view, just look at the shoes. The shoes, we have probably 4 or 5 different configurations of shoes right here, between sneakers and high heels and different types of boots and so on. And this is humanity. If I'll put everyone here in one line and let's count all the types of shoes, not all the, it's going to be quite amazing. So we need to account for these things. The most important thing, and that's also related a little bit to head-mounted displays and glass, when people look at themselves at the mirror, they have a very strong sense of self, how they want to look, what is their look that is representing their personality to the people around them. And that's a very important asset that we have. And we are actually stressed about it. So if you ever had a bad haircut, you know that feeling. You feel awkward. And that's something that is very, very important in understanding the psychology behind objects on heads, objects that you carry with you and become part of your persona. I have a lot of issues of gender. In America, it's really tough to talk about gender. We have a very diverse group of people in the office and very open, and again, this is a very liberal studio and so on, but this is really difficult to talk about gender. And we get to discussions, for instance, this is Fitbit Force, and the width of the Fitbit Force is right between what is considered masculine and feminine watch. If it was a little bit thinner, it would be considered more feminine. If it was a little bit wider, it would be considered a bit more masculine. So these are the type of issues we deal with. Now, what's important about these sensors is that many of them, and the next generation of sensors, are actually built to connect to a specific biological feature. For instance, sit close to a vein, so you could actually detect heartbeat. The problem, though, is that people wear these differently. They opt not to press the sensor against the skin, for instance. Or some of them opt to over-press it. So we need to compensate for that. And then on top of it, there are more or less 20 placements you could actually put on the human body. So how do you figure out what is the right placement? And there are more. I mean, this is kind of very generic and basically around the same proverbial issue of kinetic motion and wearables that deal with cardiovascular issues. So, in essence, what we're trying to do today is not to have smart devices. Smart devices are kind of dumb. We need devices that are wise. Devices that are wise are devices that give you, the human, the command, and they just hint when there's something important. They're not bombarding you with data. They allow you to live your life comfortably and happily without being a slave of technology. It's actually you are the master. The technology is supposed to be your slave, not the opposite. So in order to do that, we need to develop a different approach to the design of these. And in essence, there are three components that are going to be used one way or another. There's going to be some level of interaction with haptics. Haptics are subtle vibrations and things along these lines. There's going to be what we call ambient UI. These are user interface. UI is user interface. User interface that is very subtle, very much in the background, not projecting or displaying a lot of data, and has a lot of filters that allows you to program it and allows you to decide whether you want certain pieces of data at the forefront or actually way back. So let's see some of the stuff we've done. The big success of Fitbit, in my opinion, is attributed to what I call little UI. You haven't seen, Fitbit was looking like a piece of rubber, black plastic covered with a rubbery coat, and you haven't seen anything on it unless you press the button. And when you press the button, the first thing you would see is a flower. The flower is essentially a glorified progress bar that if you hit the 10,000 steps would blossom. Then if you wanted more, you would click again and you would see how many steps you had and so on and so forth. But that approach actually allowed a lot of people to feel comfortable with the Fitbit because it wouldn't flaunt the numbers. And that actually allowed a group of humans that typically the tech world not taken too seriously, women, to feel very comfortable with this device, and they actually hid this device. So they didn't want to share how many calories they burned, how many steps they walked. It's something that very comfortably felt needs to be between you and yourself. So a big thing with Fitbit was allowing you to put it wherever you wanted. And many women wanted it in the, what we call BFC, bra front and center, and actually typically hidden, and caused a lot of interesting moments whenever I had a cocktail party or something like that. I always, somehow the discussion veered and we got to Fitbit, and I always had at least one woman in the crowd or whatever says, oh, here it is, getting it out, and that was kind of an icebreaker and a lot of discussions and so on. So, but that's the story of Fitbit, basically being a very docile, behind-the-scene, lovable product that created this new phenomena of these kinetic motion sensor wearables. We've done all the product of Fitbit ever since 2007. And then then came the whole story of the wrist. And wrist is kind of the it place to be now. It is, however, a very complicated place. As I mentioned earlier, there are size differences. There's also an issue of accessorizing or jewelrizing. And you need to pick an approach, whether you are the jewel or you are next to jewels. And we picked an approach that is more, again, let's say introvert, if you wish. We are next to jewel. We are trying to play nice with other items that you have on the wrist. It could be the most precious jewel you have. Maybe grandma gave you a nice watch, or it could be just you know, a band or something like that. The other approach we took with Fitbit Flex is a modular approach, and this is very, very important because that approach actually allows Fitbit to create partnerships. And now they have a partnership going on with Tory Burch, who's going to bring to market sets of jewels that are actually going to take this little black pebble and put it into jewels. And you could see a little bit with this shot where we were aiming. And that's actually very important from a business perspective. Part of the way to mitigate the risks associated with many sizes and many tastes is the ability to take the electronics, the expensive part, and make it into a single mass production element, while you allow the attachments, the placements, the interface to the body to be very diverse. And that is the approach that Fitbit Flex took. Now, another company that we work with, and it's about to ship products, is called Sproutling. And Sproutling is a very sophisticated sensor for babies. And the notion here is actually to allow young parents to feel at ease. The interesting thing about babies, they don't come with manuals. So you walk out of the hospital with your precious little bundle of joy and you have no idea what to do with it. And the thing is, the notion here, it has multiple sensors, and it will allow you to get better advice whether the baby is sleeping well or not, the temperature is right or not, moving right or not, and so on, and allow you to get comfortable with the patterns of growth. For instance, when it's 6 or 8 months, it starts teething, and typically what you see is crazy fever for a day or so, and then it just subsides and life goes on. The interesting thing about Sproutling is that they do have what we call a beacon, and some kind of a unit that is controlling the nursery room. And these two items are connected to an app. Which brings me to a very important aspect of the work now. Nearly every project we do currently has an app. And the biggest architectural dilemma we have is to decide how much of the interface or the cues are built into the device that is on the human body and how much of it is actually on the app. So that's actually a very interesting calculation. So today you see more or less what we do. We do the device, we do the apps, we do also the identity, including the brand, in this case, Grow Happy Families. And the issue here is that it's not only about the baby, it's about the parents, and it's about the second child, and so on. And there is a little trick here that the logo is essentially, we call it the baby G. It's the same G flipped, and it looks like an 8 months old baby that's barely sitting. Which brings me to my grand unifying theory of everything that we do in the last 5 or 6 years. So I was talking about the dilemmas of the architecture at the beginning. So what we do at the beginning with the architecture, we try to figure out what is the right balance between the local software, the local hardware, and what is done in the cloud through the app on the mobile phone. So I'll give you an example. You can decide to put the biggest screen on the planet here on your wrist and basically serve regular apps. The problem with that is that as you do that, it costs a lot of money. It is growing the battery size. All these things have batteries, and we always deal with batteries. And it requires a lot of computing horsepower to actually run a very sophisticated app on your wrist. However, you could also decide not to do that and use your mobile phone. And there are a few in-between options. So typically at the beginning of the project, we have a lot of ideas that are at different locations inside this triangle. Now, once you figure that, you could easily build a layer of services, typically using the app and the cloud, but also sometimes associated with the hardware itself. And once you created the layer of services, you actually have a brand and a community that are propagated through the internet. Now, when I went to design school, I don't know, was it 25 years ago, it was industrial design school, and I actually don't know what is industrial design today, what is graphic design, what is user interface design. These are all silos. What we do is essentially figuring out this space and this kind of open formula, and I call it technology design, tech design. It's the ability to actually straddle these silos, hardware engineering, software engineering, brand, and put something together that has meaning, that is human, that is doable from a practical perspective, and make money, good money for investors. So this is more or less what we do at New Deal. The last project I want to share is a project that is called Project ARA, and it's a modular phone, mobile phone, for everyone. So a long time ago, if you wanted to buy a PC, you could configure a PC. You could decide how many hard drives are there, what kind of monitor you want, what is the memory size, and so on and so forth. And that allowed the prices of PC to drop down because there were thousands and thousands of what we call third parties, people who would develop display cards, people who would do all sorts of crazy stuff for specific high-end or low-end applications. And nothing like that happened in a mobile phone, which is de facto our PC. By the way, this is not a phone, this is your web terminal. You hardly ever talk in it. You mostly do other things with it. In essence, Project ARA is trying to break the mold of the mobile phone, and by enabling this two-side market. On one side, we'll have thousands of vendors trying to develop modules, and on the other side, we'll have Joe Public deciding which of these modules they want or not. By doing that, we'll create a new type of economy and will allow you to customize a product as cheap as below $100 or as expensive as they come. There could be scientific equipment attached to it and so on. This is in essence what is ARA doing. And we also combine into that 3D printing manufacturing. So this is not the makers. We're talking about a machine that is manufacturing quality. And it has a very unique architecture. So the architecture of ARA is based on what we call endoskeleton. This is the spine inside. And the spine inside includes special connectors and special bays that are in a certain form, and actually they have a grid, and it allows everyone to design modules with certain set sizes. And as they plug in, these modules will talk a common interface language between themselves and allow everyone basically to develop a physical module. The glory shot of ARA is this color, but there is this story behind it. We call it the Mexican girl phone. the notion was, okay, everyone can print anything they want in 3D printing. And we said, okay, what if we took a picture and create a palette automatically from that picture? So one of our guys found a picture of a Mexican girl in some village, and she had this traditional, very colorful dress. And we took that colorful dress and created a palette. And the palette actually has a pattern, and all that could be done by an algorithm automatically. You'll put your best picture, let's say a picture of Sydney Harbor, and you create immediately a color palette and a pattern that could be printed. So this is the color scheme that you see here. And the interesting thing is that the skeleton is actually, because it's a contrast, because it's made of aluminum, it will be the constant. It will stay for 5, 6, 7 years, while you probably will replace all the other modules. If you dropped it and the screen cracked, you'll buy a new screen and you'll replace it. And by the way, if you want a small phone, this is the smaller endoskeleton. It's about 2/3 of the first one. You could easily swap it within a few seconds. There is a hidden benefit to the Aura phone that most people don't pay attention to. Again, another buzzword. It's called hot swappable modules. It means that if you talk and your battery runs out, you could actually swap the battery and swap in another battery without losing the call. So you could easily take few cameras in your pocket, and you see these beautiful sights here. You could actually swap between a camera with one lens and into a camera with another lens. I could actually exchange modules. I could actually barter. This is worth 2 of the others, and so on. And that's another part of that sharing economy that hopefully we'll have. So all that actually goes back to a little story of my childhood. I was born to 2 architects, and I was more or less literally born in an architect studio. And I remember all my life these type of town planners, maps. And the interesting thing that led to the design of Aura was actually along these 2 images. So this is an Italian village, and if you happen to live here and you wanted to add a room, or let's say a balcony, you needed half the village to give you permission. That's because these towns look like that. It's a mess. It's basically grown organically and so on. Now, we cannot allow it to happen in Aura because we want vendors from all around the world to develop components. So we needed something that is a lot more like that, that allows you to know that if you have a lot, you know where the electricity comes, where you dump sewage to, and so on. We needed the common logic that everyone can share. And we build a grid that is around 20 millimeters units. So we have a 1x1 is 20 by 20, and 2x2 is 40 by 40. And that was kind of the breakthrough in analysis of all the issues. And we call this concept parceling. Very much currently, it's a part of the vernacular of Project Aura, and it's basically borrowed from town planning. And the other element is that once we created, once we created the parceling, the endoskeleton came to life because suddenly we got a very interesting dynamic line here that is actually separating these parcels, and it's not looking like a chaotic, meaningless gibberish there. So this is Project Aura, and it's coming to reality early 2015. And it's pretty exciting, and I'm also excited that this is one of our kind of dark projects that we were lucky to be able to share, because Paul and the team at Google, then Motorola, actually exposed it earlier. And that's, by the way, one of our designers, Susan, and she's dealing with all the color, material, and finish, and part of the team of and her hands are all over the internet now. That's it. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Gadi. That was
Thanks.
fantastic. Please have a seat.
Thanks.
Let's have a chat. I was so busy tweeting out that picture of the endoskeleton. I missed that. Wow, that was dizzying, but really exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure this has actually probably been our most active Twitter audience, by the way. So congrats to all of you for that. I'd love to see some of your questions coming through by Twitter. So please use the hashtag #VividIdeas, and I'll get to those shortly. But first, I've got a ton of questions for you, Gadi.
Sure.
New Deal Design is a design studio with a manifesto,
Yeah.
which I really enjoy, and it's actually quite revolutionary. I like that your manifesto includes phrases like revolt,
Yeah.
and declare, revolt, explore, dissect, peak, and connect. What is this key declaration? And how does it impact on the projects that you choose to take on?
It's a long story. I think we found out that we tend to think in a contrarian way, and all the best work we've done was basically by taking the client's brief and actually redoing it in a friendly manner, but definitely in an assertive manner. And through the years, we've been very, I would say, apprehensive about sharing that philosophy. And actually, in the last year and a half, we decided we're just going to go for it. And that is very much what we do. As you've seen in the images, we take topics that are actually quite complex and sometimes really touchy, and being able to talk straightforwardly, honestly, and directly is something that typically in the design world not done. And we got to do that because really, you know, something that became such a huge success for Fitbit, for instance, what is called BFC in Sanitize American, bra front and center, is something that is not easy to suggest to a client. And we figured that's going to be the best placement, and indeed, after the product came to market, about 60% of the placements were there. So, because it's natural. So, being able to have a dialogue that is open also includes the ability to share opinions that are not necessarily politically correct or business lingo or tech lingo. And you saw a lot of our discussions we have are actually taking tech lingo, putting on the side, and start talking in a human way. And that's part of what you see in no website.
One of the things I like about your manifesto is that you say that technology needs a better relationship with people, and not the other way around. Mm-hmm. When we first spoke, when I was talking to Gadi about coming to Vivid Ideas, I liked the way you said that we've become slaves to the data stream, and that we need to actively do something as designers and as kind of conscious consumers to interrupt that disconnection that we're having with the present moment and with the real world. How do you measure everything you do against that idea of technology having a better relationship with people?
It's a fundamental question, and I need to kind of rewind and start. Again, industrial designers for the longest time were given an engineering apparatus with some business plan, and they were putting lipstick on it. Mm-hmm. And that kind of worked for the longest time. The problem is that the world looked at what I'm doing as gadgets, and I still hear it all the time. This thingy in my pocket is not a gadget. And the one test that I did once, somebody said gadget, it was a writer, I think in pretty famous media. I said, okay, give it to me. Give it. And yeah, now suddenly you understand that this is probably the most personal object that you have. And suddenly these gadgets in the last 10 years became essential to our existence. Now, when they rose to that level of importance, there was no change in the mindset of how they were designed. And as we are making these gadgets more and more personable, like wearables, it's becoming more acute to have a standpoint about humanity and about the emotional sides of this design process and so on. And the design world and the technology world so far haven't agreed that this is what it is. And for me, I found out that there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between people that will literally fall apart if their iPhone is dead and what they actually practiced in reality, which was, okay, technology, electronics, we just pack it, ship it, and so on. You know, somewhat a blasé approach to the importance of these elements. And I take them very, very seriously. And they're here to stay. Whether you like it or not, the next 250 years, they're here to stay.
That process of not just being the lipstick, it's really hard to not say lipstick on a pig. It's just kind of it rolls off the tongue. But the lipstick approach to design, that's a really hard script to unwrite. And it is a very unusual approach that you have at New Deal, where you get to really control that whole chain from concept, branding, device, software, right through to the brand and then the community experience.
We try. We don't always have the full control. And it's never control. It's a dialogue. It's a make sure. It's very important. It's a co-creation process. Yeah.
I'm sure that there's a lot of designers in this audience who would love to have that level of dialogue. And do you have any advice for how you can, in a commercial context, explain why that level of co-creation is useful?
To the business person, I basically will say, there's certain problems associated with that technology that your school of thought cannot figure. And that's a reality. Today, with these technologies, there are certain issues that are core to your business model that the schooling that you had is not good enough. And this is where I'm start talking about EQ versus IQ. And it's a very interesting story that most people tend to forget. Steve Jobs, a genius, died, and you were seeing all the pouring eulogies and so on and so forth. Not one of them mentioned that Steve was actually a liberal art guy. And that's a very unique quality for leadership in the Silicon Valley. And that is the type of leadership we need to see through the process, just to balance regular numbers, speeds, and feeds that the tech world is very in tune with.
So the thing that's unique about Steve Jobs, I mean, people always point to the fact that he studied typography,
Yep.
that he respected design, and people, there tends to be a big focus on the devices he made as opposed to the UX, which is actually, I think, the thing that's most revolutionary about the Apple approach, and the user experience. One of the things that you mentioned briefly was this idea of the gesture with the Lytro and trying to actually be conscious of how people use the product and how they feel when they use it. Do you think that what are the other elements that a designer should consider, particularly in this kind of product design and in wearable design?
I think trying to really hone on your humanness. I wasn't meaning for anything grand when I just said, how about that?
Yeah.
You know, it just happened because I'm maybe animated and moving my hands a lot, but we are all doing that. So just paying attention to that and seeing that people behave in a peculiar human way and just adopt to it. There are many devices who try to teach people to behave differently. And actually, I think if you're augmenting a behavior that is already there, part of culture, you're probably having a better time, an easier time to create a new object.
How many designers are at New Deal, and do you have people who focus on that observation task?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
you get me there, okay. They're all designers. We have engineers, designers, and so on. We don't have specialized researchers and all that. Very, very strong emphasis on multifaceted personalities. There's no process where we have a PhD in social science dumping 300-page on the designer's side. As designers walk the streets, ask people, experience, and then go back to the shop and playing around with material and finding the solutions. I don't believe in these silos of, separation of
Different experts.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that might answer a question we've got here from Alison Webb. In breaking down the silos of different designers, how do you partner with the right experts or people for your projects? Do you do everything internally or do you have external?
Every once in a while, we have external expert for very specific issues. Clients typically come to us with their sets of experts, and that's because that's how the world is built. We are generally generalists, so we use these experts quite rarely on our own, but the clients typically come with their own experts, and we try to weave the connecting tissues between these silos of thought and disciplines.
I loved your line about moving from smart to wise devices. What are some of the characteristics of wise devices? So this idea that they give you the command, that they enhance your experience, not detract from it. Are there any other qualities that you'd describe?
The highest quality, and it's going to take a long time, is the device will have intuition. Anyone who ever tried talking to Siri understand how ridiculous it is. So it's going to take a long time. But in between, we'll find ourselves using devices that are a little bit more humble before they shout and ask for attention. That's the kind of step one. Just shut up and be in the background. That's number one. The second is actually having some level of priorities and ability to learn what you like. And later on, we'll get more and more intuitive and sophisticated way of thinking in these devices.
Well, while we're talking about Apple,
Yeah.
I have another question. This one's from Celeste Humphrey. What do you think about Apple's new Health Kit app?
That's an excellent question. I think first, Apple is embracing this whole phenomena of digital health, which is great. There are a little behind, so it's probably suggesting that they'll try to go hard at that, and there's been a lot of rumors around iWatch and so on. I think it's a natural step in the right direction. I think that the marks were there already. It's clear that we'll be dealing with health and digital health, and they just embraced it and made it into an integral part of their OS.
I have another question here. It's in regards to the way that New Deal Design works on projects. Do you take a risk on startups, or do you and kind of take equity, or you know, say I'll take some shares down the track, or do you always take a fee?
So that's a very good question, because it's been a lot. There's been a lot of discussions in the designer community about the role of the designer, possibly as an entrepreneur and so on. So a few things. So we always take risk by the fact that we work with startups. So for us, clients always pay us in two ways. One is money. The second one is actually creative opportunity, ability to play in a sandbox, in their sandbox, is a form of play. It is a form of pay. So we focus mostly on fee, and every once in a while we take a more risky approach with equity and other ways, by the way. I'm
Cute dogs.
What?
You take payment in cute dogs.
Cute
and dog
dogs.
videos.
Yeah, it's true. That's
Okay.
one thing I want to say is that I am not sure, and really I don't have a very firm view on it, but I'm not sure designers need to be entrepreneurs. I think there is some level of conflict of interest. It's kind of a hard word, but there's a conflict between being the honest broker of design and human values and being entrepreneurial. And I am not entirely set on where I am with that.
I'm also interested in whether you actually, when you want a client to come to you, do you want someone to come to you when they're at the kind of PowerPoint 5-slide stage, when they've got the drawing on the back of the napkin, when they've got investment? Do you want to have a prototype? What's the ideal stage for a startup to come to you with a product idea?
I don't care how developed the idea is, as long as we have a good dialogue. So the one thing that I'm telling any startup is that they typically come and they shop around, and there are quite a lot of good designers in San Francisco, amazing designers. And I said, you know, guys, just pick the team that you could talk honestly and directly with. The most important thing in that stage of your life and what you're trying to do is to have a really good, honest dialogue with the people you work with. So regardless if they had the brief of 500-page or nothing, if there is a way to influence and having a good talk, that is the one criteria I would say is number one for me.
Well, that might actually answer our next question from Frankie. How do you select projects? Are there certain categories that you're thinking, okay, we've done the dogs, we've got the babies covered.
No snakes.
We need athletes, poisonous spiders,
Yeah.
you know, weather. I mean, are there categories that you've got lined up? And
So we cannot engage in competing products. If the problem is similar, we cannot engage. So we need to diversify, obviously. You know, we have now in the studio things that are totally crazy in size, things that are teeny, the size of a fingernail, and things that are room size. So I don't know. People have crazy ideas and they want them designed, and we're just having fun with it, you know.
we might take some other questions from the audience as well. If anyone has a question in the room and not on Twitter, we can bring a microphone over to you. So just raise your hand. We've got one back there.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks for coming over. Yeah, I guess my question is, when you're talking about the Lytro design, you were saying that your designs influence the engineering rather than the engineering influencing the design. I'm just wondering, when you approach that, I mean, do you go in there with a sense of the engineering capabilities, or do you kind of just come up with a design and pose open questions to the engineering to say, can you fix this problem to fit the design?
We are quite crafty within electronics. It's usually taking a few meetings for engineers to understand that, but typically we're quite crafty. So we're not coming as the naive, this kind of, how to say, kind of the flamboyant Italian designer, just, hand wave, can we have it a little bit more? We are nuts and bolts, kind of hardcore technologies, but we use sketches and napkin sketches, and after you do a few of these, the engineers stop asking questions whether you're capable or not.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a pretty technical back of the napkin sketch. There were milligrams on there, and it was nicely done. While we've got the mic coming down here, have you got the mic already? Oh, great. Go for it.
Hello. Is this working? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about successful projects. Why don't you tell us a little bit about failures and how you learned from them?
Failure. First, failure is not an option. The reason I like working with startups is that I know they'll ship no matter what they'll ship. Actually, the larger companies are more difficult. And
So the larger companies are more risk averse, whereas...
Yeah, so for instance, one of the projects that we felt were potentially earth-shattering a few years back, we've done a very beautiful design for a small PC for a company called Dell. And it was very green and very innovative, and we fought hard it took about 3 years to bring it to market. And then it didn't sustain itself and kind of got out of the lineup very quickly. In essence, I mean, there is a limit to what we can do. We cannot force a large company to keep something in the lineup if they don't sell well. Sometimes they don't know how to sell it, and so on. It's always sad. I mean, we have a lot of projects that didn't see the light of day because something happened. And, every once in a while we part ways with clients because we have philosophical differences. For instance, the second generation Lytro was not designed by New Deal because I decided that we have a significant philosophical difference. And without going into the details, that's part of what happens sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a great question. I have another couple of questions from Twitter while we take some more in the room. Okay. This is an interesting one. Are there any categories that you would never design for?
We don't design luxury products.
You don't design luxury products?
Yeah.
Okay, we're back to the manifesto. Why is that?
Because the company is called New Deal Design.
Yeah. New Deal, like...
New Deal, FDR.
Yeah.
Is very important for me. I believe that we need to develop products that help normal people live their life, and I have absolutely no interest in doing $50,000 watch. Don't care about it. I understand there is some art to that, and some people want to flaunt it. Just go for it. I just don't do that.
So the diamond-encrusted Fitbit is just not going to happen?
Not with me.
Gadi, this is another, I guess, ethical and philosophical question. This is from Bryony. What's your view on the social impact of wearables that capture images of third parties? Is it too soon to have an opinion on this? Or?
So I assume this is connected to the whole issue of privacy. And so I think that historically 2013 will be the year of privacy. I think the industry was completely caught off guard, broadsided. Snowden came in, Glass came, a lot of 2 or 3 interesting litigation cases in the US and so on. And I do believe that there is privacy. So all the people who think that there aren't privacy, I'll take a picture of them in their bathroom and we'll see. So there is privacy, there is a need or a yearn for privacy, but the meaning of that privacy is changing. And we are now in a big social, cultural, political process of figuring that big question. So there'll be mistakes left and right, and eventually I'm an optimist. I think we'll figure out how we're going to behave in the next millennia. But in between, there's no way other than experimenting. There is no kind of magic rule and so on. And I think I just want people to be respectful of others.
So it basically comes down to, I guess we haven't developed the etiquette for this new generation of devices.
Yeah, I think
and
the
new
biggest,
forms of
I mean,
interaction.
the issue to talk about the glass all and all that, there was a big case in San Francisco of somebody walking into a bar and taking pictures and then suggesting she didn't take pictures even though she posted the video. So it's just mind-boggling. And the question for me is, why wouldn't glass have a little shutter or a light that says, now I'm taking pictures? So there are really simple, I would say even remedial solutions to some of these issues, and just designers need to be cognizant that there are issues along these lines.
Do we have another question at the back here?
Yeah, hi.
Yes.
You mentioned the desired quality of design being intuitive and this ambient user interface. What are some of the barriers to that happening at the moment, or flipped, what are some of the real opportunities for this area to make that more intuitive and more background?
The number one dilemma or the battle, as I had this picture of between people who are for data and people who are for experience, I think this is very fundamental to the industry. The industry believes in data. And I'm fighting against that. So when, I had, we had a group of people walking into our office with a device that was around $300 or $400 and had everything and the kitchen sink in it. And through 2 hours discussion, we said, okay, essentially what you need is only that, correct? And they kind of locked eyes and says, yes. And that distilled feature set was about $30 in cost. So the real thing is that the mentality that everything in the kitchen sink needs to be on your device is so strong today. And I think people will slowly understand that it's not the solution.
We've got quite a few interesting questions coming through on Twitter. We've got a question from Sam about your patent library. Do you register every one of your designs? Do you register the designs that you design for other people? Do you file patents for ideas you may never get to work on or that might not be realized?
So part of us being advisors, consultants, whatever, we have a very simple rule. Dear client, you own everything. Now they come back and say, can we write on that pattern? Yes, sure you can. The clients own all the intellectual property, and that's very simple for us.
Another question from Halans. How do you feel about crowdsourced design like Quirky and GE?
I don't know if Quirky is exactly crowdsourced. With regards to Quirky, I think that designers should be well paid. Hint, hint, and exclamation mark. but crowdsourcing is an interesting phenomena. I think typically crowdsourcing is trying to do three things. First is establishing some kind of a co-creation process where your idea has been influenced by the crowd. In reality, that part of crowdsourcing has failed completely, even though I think this would be the most interesting part of crowdsourcing. So co-creation doesn't happen. Getting investment by the crowd is nice, yet the question is, why couldn't you get that investment from somebody else? And that's a question I'm asking everyone who is trying to suggest to go crowdsourcing. What's wrong with the idea that you cannot sit with quite a lot of people, good people with money who are willing to invest? So why won't you do that? Is it because you have a very strong ego and you don't want to share part of your venture, or you valuation, whatever, I don't know. The third issue is PR. And I think crowdsourcing has been phenomenal in promoting good ideas. By the way, I don't know if most people understand it or know that, but the beginning of it was actually with film, the film industry, actually pitching ideas for film. And that has been really a success. And I think similarly with design and any other thing, if you could create a kind of a upswell of interest in your idea and prove it through that platform, great. So.
Because, I mean, there are a lot of benefits like getting the audience involved,
Yeah.
but then the question is, yes, if you couldn't get that support or investment, are you selling it right? Is there a flaw with the product? Is there...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in many cases, I sometimes feel that the crowd is not informed enough to make these decisions, and they're being taken for a ride. And sometimes that is kind of causes me to pause. You know, there's this new innovative idea that is looking for an audience, and at the same time, the audience is not fully informed. So the question is, you know, if there was an expert, someone who has seen things around a little bit, maybe the idea could have been morphed into something else. So there's a dilemma here.
We'll take this question over here.
Yeah, hi. I was just interested in what the process is or the workflow in creating those wow moments in your UI and your UX.
In creating, sorry, what?
The wow moments.
The wow moments.
The process? I'm not a process person.
You're not a process? What are you, like an inspiration person and then you pass it on?
There is an issue of serendipity in the process, and we need to be brave enough to sometimes just go with the flow. And it's very difficult, but it has happened that we kind of stopped the process and revert and redid some pieces of work. Generally, we start with something we call vision design. We try to create an amalgamation of everything the client wanted, plus brilliant kind of sparks that come. And typically what we try to do is to pick the most annoying idea, we call it the dark horse, and keep it alive. And as we do that, we actually validate the mainstream ideas. And we found out that in 50% of the cases, the dark horse is actually taking over. There was something interesting in that process, you know, having something that is contrarian and so on. And then we work with a lot of designers at the beginning. We bring ideas, we talk, we bounce. And just about every day there is someone who's coming, you know, actually this sketch, if we turn it upside down, looks like something. And then there's another guy jumping in, you know, it reminds me. And that's something that is so important. those interactions, and I actually, this is my biggest peeve against computers. You cannot have it in computers, and we're talking about UI. UI is actually having huge issues with that because the process is being so central on computers, and we're actually trying to yank people out of their computers and back to pen and paper, and just to have that banter, and that's quote unquote the process, I guess.
We'll have to take the last audience question here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's actually further to that discussion, just about your management style. When you're working with lots of designers, some designers are very creative and they've got their very strong vision of what they want to have done, and they produce it. And how do you work with that? Do you work big picture and take that, or do you work better with people who've got very strong visions and want to stick to it, or do you actually sound more collaborative? And who makes the final decisions on big picture and then small picture or details?
First, there is no difference between big picture and small picture. Second, we have a very egalitarian system. I've been sketching details for interns' ideas. That's a reality. Obviously, I'm doing other things today. I have relatively little studio time, but I cherish that. But I still manage to be in every important juncture of a project. We try to weave, ideas come in all shapes and sizes, so sometimes the idea is small, kind of small picture, and we try to augment it with a big picture story, and the opposite, until we distill these few key ideas. And we try to improve ideas if we find that there is a kernel of importance. We try to bolster the idea and actually give it stilts, so to speak, until it could hold on its own. And sometimes it falls apart. I don't know if I could answer it in that level. There's no linear way of actually describe what is generally big picture and small picture.
So for our last question, because we have flown through the time hearing from you, I'm going to combine two very excellent Twitter questions. This one's from Nathan. What trends, technologies are exciting you at the moment? And another one from Flipping Around. What trend or emerging technology have you seen, but it's not yet mainstream, that you're excited about? So what's coming? Apart from Ara, by the way, which looks amazing.
It connects to Ara and so on. So the topic of personalization or customization of electronics is a big backdrop against everything that is going to be done in the next 10 years. It could be something that is going to be just a sensor that is built for your specific biology, but it could be something that is just made for your style. It is actually a huge dilemma for designers. One of the biggest problems, and actually in design there's this methodology called user-centered design, which basically you go and ask people what they want, and you discover that they don't know what they want. So, and that actually is a big dilemma with new technology, because people don't have a frame of reference. So how can you do customization, personalization, when people don't have a frame of reference? So that is like a big dilemma we have, how to deal with these issues, and how to allow enough of that co-creation process with Joe Public without being too dictatorial. And that's an interesting dilemma for me, and that's going to be increasing dilemma in the next, regardless of what is the sensor and all that. It's going to become more and more substantial part of design. How do you weave, and how do you allow playfulness that is informed and yet controlled to people who want to personalize electronics. So.
And I suppose the modularity of a unit like ARA comes into it, where you're asking people to take a bit more control and giving them an opportunity to take more control over.
Yeah, and this is a baby step. I think that eventually we'll get to things that will be nearly organic. So the question is, what do you do there? How do you interview a person and ask them how they want their, I don't know, augmented brain to be? We will be dealing with really difficult topics there.
We're actually dealing with that topic tomorrow night. Here's a little plug.
Yeah.
We've got an amazing session called Nina Tandon on building with biology. Nina is a stem cell researcher and a tissue engineer who is working on how we use biological systems to build everything from clothing to machines to buildings, and of course within our body as well. So come back tomorrow, let's talk about that again. Okay. Meanwhile, thank you so much. What a brilliant discussion. Great to see such a philosophical and egalitarian designer. Please thank Gadi Amit.
Thank you.
And thanks for the great questions and the great Twitter action too. Thanks. See you again.